What is the importance of theory? Hello, YouTube. This is Dr. Dave Mastak, and I'm talking to you about reciprocity.com. The E is spelled with a 3. You can check it out. It is a sharing economy proofreading application that I am trying to build. But today I wanted to talk about the series of what I call a Nerd Out Wednesday. It's all about terminologies and things that you might hear in science. And so the previous weeks I talked about the dependent variable, and then I talked about the independent variable. And now I'm going to talk about theory and the importance of organizational, or in particular, just the theory in the social sciences in particular. So I actually am a professor of innovation strategy, entrepreneurship, um, in a business school, and so I actually think in terms of organizations and organizational theory. But this applies very broadly, not only to the social sciences, but to a large to most sciences. I actually was trained in engineering, and we also had sort of a theoretical mindset in engineering as well. We're often thinking about different frameworks of how to understand the world. So what is a theory? Well, a theory is some sort of system of ideas. It's a set of propositions of how the world actually works. And the reason why you're doing that is you're trying to explain a particular phenomenon, how the independent variable A leads to the dependent variable B. And you want to explain this relationship such that it actually makes sense. So you often think in terms of how the independent variable, this is a thing that sort of moves, right, independently, and that is affecting the dependent variable, and it moves in response to that independent variable. And there is a reason, and this is the reason is based on the theory. So you want to think about how this actually works together. What is a particular phenomenon that is explaining, what is the particular theory that is explaining how this phenomenon works? And this is very, very important. The first reason why it's so important is you want to think, you want to rule out all the other possible sort of spurious causes of what actually might be causing this relationship. And the only way that you can do that is you have this sort of set of or system of ideas or propositions that sort of fit together that allow you to think about, well, what are the other possible causes that might explain this? And those possible causes are what are called spurious causes, that you want to rule that out. And the only way that you can think about these different ideas or different relationships is through some sort of framework, some sort of theory that sort of puts it all together. The other reason is you're trying to think of the different mechanisms of how that actually works. So there might be, so for example, if you're thinking, so I study organizational learning. This is the idea that organizations actually improve or may not improve because of the acquisition of experience over time. And you might have in mind, well, what are the different reasons why organizations might improve while they accumulate or they pool experience and knowledge together, or they pool experience together, and that turns into knowledge somehow. You acquire that knowledge somehow. And so there's all these different mechanisms and how that all fits together. And those are the different mechanisms of how you might explain this relationship. This A leads to B, or the independent variable leads to the dependent variable. That's so important to think about how that fits together and what are the different mechanisms. And the only way that you can explain those different mechanisms is through the theory that you have. The other thing that's really incredibly important with a theory, it allows you to generalize not from just the sort of local phenomenon that you're looking at, right? So I might be looking at companies that are specific to, so I'm in Florida. It might be specific to the companies that are in Florida. I want to think about how this is actually going to be generalizable. So if I just look at, I look at applications, for example, a software application from Florida. I don't want to just generalize to that. That doesn't make a lot of sense, right? I can't explain a lot of different things. So what I want to do is be able to generalize to explain to many different phenomena, many different, say, maybe just software firms in general. Maybe I want to generalize more broadly to all companies, so that's going to explain how the behavior of Fortune 500 companies, those are the largest companies in the world, are going to operate. Maybe I want to explain how only private companies want to operate. I want to think about all these different ways of how they, the theory that I'm generating or the phenomenon I'm looking at can actually be generalizable to these different companies or different sort of sets of relationships. And the only way that you can do that is if you have a theory, right? So if my theory is that organizations are improving because of experience that they're accumulating, well, it's not just because that they are software companies from Florida. It's also generalizable to Fortune 500 companies, that they are going to get experience. It's going to be at a much larger scale, and their experience is going to be a lot different. But it could be generalizable to all these different other firms, and that's what you want to think about. The other really important thing with a theory, so there's three different things, right? So the other third reason that it's so important, it allows you to create situations. If you are a experimentalist or if you're a scientist, for example, you want to not what you're trying to do in science is actually falsify. You're trying to prove your thing, your particular explanation wrong. You're trying to really think about how you're trying to prove that wrong. And what you can do, and in a really cool study will do this, is it will look at this particular situation. It will create, based on the theory that you've generated, the only explanation that you can think about is based on this theory that you have. It rules out all the other possible explanations. So a good theory is going to create situations where you can rule out all these other explanations, and the only possible reason for that to exist is because of that one particular theory. And now I admit some of the stuff that we that we study, or the theories that we study in organizational theory, this is the particular area that I'm interested in, that does have some problems in that it's often hard to rule out other situations. Well, what we often do, and what scientists often do, and this is a somewhat of a flaw in the current sort of state of science, as some people think. Some people think it's a flaw, some people think it's a feature. But what you often do is you think about the particular phenomenon that you're going to study, and then you think about, well, what is the appropriate theory that fits that particular phenomenon? And the reason that you can do this, and the reason why it's sometimes very advantageous, is that there's many different situations that just don't quite fit. So the explanation that I think about, so for example, say you're looking at how leaders behave, for example, in an organization. Well, there's a set of theories that talk about how leadership works, or how leaders and followers work in an organization. If you're looking at sort of more general and you want to look at how organizations work, well, maybe then you might think about the different routines. These are the interactions and activities on a regular basis that happens in organizations. Maybe you want to think about that instead of sort of the leadership perspective, and you can sort of shift theories in a different way. So the analogy in science that I often think about, so I'm trained as a chemical engineer, sometimes you might have theories about thermodynamics, for example, and it fits very well with explaining sort of fluid flow, or how heat sort of transfers through particular phenomenon. But then there are, maybe you want to think about sort of the ideal gas law, which might fit better in certain situations by using the ideal gas law. So you sort of pick and choose the different theories depending on the context. Because often what ends up happening is that the theory that you're trying to create is not necessarily all that particularly generalizable to everything. It shouldn't be, right? It's really difficult to sort of have a general theory of the world. You want to have sort of specific theories, but you want to create theories that are sort of generalizable enough that it can explain many different phenomena, but also sort of specific to the specific situation. So the reason why this is a problem, some people suggest that this is a problem, because then you can sort of cherry pick the theories and explanations depending on the phenomenon that you have, and it is, and you're sort of doing pseudoscience, where you can sort of just pick and choose phenomenon, rather than sort of having this general explanation that can explain a lot of different things. Now there's kind of a debate on whether which way is the most appropriate way, but it's something to think about when you're doing that. One idea is to sort of making it sort of customizable to the population that you're thinking about, but then also making it generalized, as well as making it then it can explain more phenomenon. And there's kind of a tension there, and we often struggle as scientists to think about what the appropriate theory, appropriate explanation is for that phenomenon to exist, right? So from the independent variable to affect the dependent variable, we often struggle for that. And that's actually what happens in the review process when you're providing a scientific journal, is you're going through and somebody's trying to pick apart with all these other different explanations how that might exist, and there's many different explanations, particularly in organizations. And I can get into that and talk about it for hours and hours and hours, but I'm not going to. I just wanted to point that out today. I hope that this video is very, very helpful for you in your development of whether you're writing a PhD thesis, writing a dissertation, you're in graduate school for whatever reason, you're thinking about graduate school and you want to do a graduate degree in, say, organizational theory, strategy, or something like that in a business school. These are the things that we often think about. The other thing that you should, or I wanted to point out, so for those of you who are currently subscribed to this YouTube channel, you are so cool, you're amazing, I love you. If you think these videos are cool, make sure you do subscribe. I'm putting these out for every day, currently for probably maybe 90, 100, 120 days. I'm trying to do a challenge where I'm trying to push myself to do that every day, so I can get the word out there about reciprocity. If you want to check out reciprocity, just go on the website and you can watch many of the other videos in the past that I've put out. But with that, take care and have a good day. Bye.